Hello and welcome to Embodied by Grace. I am Melissa Rose and I just want to welcome you to the show. If you are new here, this is where we talk about faith, wellness, life. I share stories, testimonies. If you're not new, welcome back. I also want to I mention in every episode that we read and pray the Bible every day on YouTube. So go ahead and subscribe on YouTube. There are playlists as well. So right now we're reading the book of Romans. So there's a playlist for Romans. And then there's a playlist for reading and praying the Bible in case you need to catch up. All of the days are categorized there. So if you're looking just to get into your Bible a little more or start your day with a prayer and a few verses, it's just a couple of minutes. So we would love to have you join. Okay, so today is story time, and I want to share a very personal story about my own life, about my divorce, and not only my own divorce, but going through my parents' divorce as a child. This is actually going to be a two-part series. So in this first part, I'm going to share a lot of the story, some of the background, and then the next part will be sort of how I was redeemed or how I started relying on God and the Holy Spirit after those very, just difficult and traumatic experiences. So in this first episode, I am just going to share. So grab some tea, grab a coffee, get cozy. This is important. So even if you've never been through a divorce, even if your parents have not been divorced, maybe you know someone that's divorced, someone in your family. But this is really for anybody who's ever experienced shame. And if you're human, you've experienced shame. This is just part of the human experience, I believe. So even if this doesn't affect you directly or this doesn't resonate with you directly, I think there still might be some good nuggets in here. So I invite you to still listen along. So the thing with shame, I'll start by saying this, is throughout my life, throughout the 40 years I've been on this planet, I am certain that the devil, the enemy, Satan, whatever you want to call him, he wants us in shame. He wants us feeling bad about ourselves, bad about our choices, bad about our decisions, bad about our appearance, bad about our accomplishments, what we do, what we don't do. He wants us to dwell on every little thing. He wants us to beat ourselves up. And I don't know about you, but I've spent a lot of my life doing that. I spent a lot of my life doing that because of my own actions, but also the actions of other people, especially my parents. And so I guess that's where I'll start this story. Again, even if you don't have divorced parents, I'm sure there's something about your family or your parents or something about how you grew up that caused you shame. So yeah, mine was my parents getting divorced. And it happened when I was about 12. So I want to be very open and real and vulnerable here, but obviously for the sake of my family, my ex-husband, just people in my life, I do want to respect them and their privacy. So I'm going to be as open as I can, but I will also just be respectful. So yeah, that happened when I was 12. And, if you've gone through a divorce, you know that there's no good time for that to happen. I would say as a preteen girl, that was probably one of the worst times that it could happen. It was the summer. Yeah, I remember the summer before 7th grade. It was a really difficult summer. I mean, you're dealing with the normal teenage girl things. Anyway, I actually got my period that summer, so that was a whole thing. My dad had just moved out, and it was a rough time of life. I shared my full testimony, which is also up on YouTube. It's on the podcast, but that was the summer, I believe, I really started having eating issues and started using food as a way to cope. I know I mentioned, but I'll share it again, that was the summer I came home from camp, and I came home to an empty house, and I ate an entire can of vanilla frosting in one sitting. And I think it was just honestly something to soothe me, something to comfort me. I didn't have anywhere else to turn. There was no one home. I felt abandoned. And so I turned to food. So that's another piece of this, right? Shame, abandonment. I felt abandoned by my parents in different ways. And even though, I was a preteen and I wanted to act like I was an adult and I was a firstborn, so I was very independent, I was pretty self-sufficient, but I became unhealthily self-reliant. And I think that did stem from a place of just feeling abandoned and that I couldn't count on anybody, I couldn't trust anybody, and I ultimately had to, quote unquote, take care of myself. So I think that all happened sort of subconsciously. I wasn't like 12, 13 having like this conscious, idea of what was going on. I think looking back, it's easier to kind of put those pieces together. So the other thing that this did is it fueled my perfectionism. So I think a lot of firstborns, we naturally have this built into us. I don't know why that I have a psych degree and I still don't know exactly why for myself, why this is. But it comes from a place of proving. I do know that. I don't know the science, but I do know that it comes from a place of wanting to prove and to prove your worth. I think there are expectations maybe placed on us, consciously or subconsciously. And I know I placed a lot of expectations on myself. So having expectations on yourself is one thing, but I also place a lot of expectations on other people. And I'll get into this again too when I talk about my own divorce and my own marriage. But I feel like what was going on was everything was sort of out of control around me. I couldn't control my parents splitting up. I couldn't control their actions. I couldn't control so many of these things. So I started using food as a way to control. So I had very unhealthy eating habits, we'll just say that. So controlling food, how much I ate, the perfectionism, so especially in school with grades, with appearance, just overall what I did and how I looked, just trying to have this facade of being perfect. And that really fueled a lot of my teenage years, moving into college, early adulthood. I think I was trying to prove to the world and myself that I wasn't a product of my surroundings. I wasn't a product of my parents. I wasn't a product of a broken home. And I do, looking back, I had a boyfriend in college and he had the picture perfect family. His dad was a pastor. They were very religious and everything was it just seemed so great on the outside. And I just remember I just felt so much shame being around him and his family. And there was always this sense of having to prove that, I was a good person and, I wasn't going to repeat the same mistakes. And I felt very judged, not only by them, but a lot of people, even people in my extended family. I felt judged by people I didn't know. And at that time, and at least where I lived, I didn't have any friends that had divorced parents. And now I know that it is a common thing, especially now. But at that time, I felt like I was on an island. I didn't have any friends that had divorced parents. And it was not common in my family. So I definitely felt judged, and I judged my parents. So looking back, I can absolutely admit I was extremely judgmental. I didn't cut them any slack. I was very angry at them. I blamed them for everything. And it was really, it was difficult. Even to this day, I think the relationships that I have with them have been affected, and so it's interesting as an adult looking back at your actions as a child. And of course, you're just doing the best that you can. You're trying to survive. You're trying to make sense of essentially your world falling apart. But I was very judgmental, and that really fueled my own self-criticism, I guess. So at one point, I don't know when this shifted, but really placing sort of blame on myself for a lot of things, not directly for their divorce, but I started to internalize a lot of those feelings that I had. So I don't know if that makes sense. So what this did for me was, with the proving and having to just be all the things and appear perfect and have the perfect grades and do it all, it really fueled this masculine energy. So I learned a lot about this when I was in the self-development, self-help world. And I don't always like to talk about a lot of these sort of topics, but the masculine, feminine energy, it is real. Energy is real. And what I did, even at a very young age, is I embodied a lot of this masculine energy where I had to do everything for myself. Like I said, I became very self-reliant, hyper independent, couldn't trust anybody, did everything for myself. And I know that affected my relationships, my friendships, but it also affected my marriage. So I got married when I was 26, and I married someone wonderful. We are still great friends to this day. Again, I have nothing negative to say about him, but I will say that I got married at a time in my life when, I guess, biologically, I wasn't like that young, at least where I'm from, but I did not know myself at all. And I wanted to get married, for many reasons, but one of the reasons was because it was something that I felt like I was supposed to do. And if I was successful, if I looked like I had my life together, of course I wanted my life together, but if I did all these things, then no one could ever question. No one could question my worth. No one could question my family, because they would look at me and say, oh yeah, Melissa turned out great. Look at her. She went to college. She graduated with honors. She got a great job with the government. She bought a house. She got married. She has a dog. She has all these things. She's getting promoted. Her life is great, and she's not a product of, a broken family. And again, I didn't realize all of this at the time. This wasn't like going through my head as I was getting married, but looking back, that definitely played into it. So yeah, I got married at a time when I was not healed from anything that had gone on in my family. I wasn't healed from my parents' divorce. I wasn't healed from my own lack of self-worth. And I'd had a pretty tumultuous relationship with my mom, which factored in. So just a lot of things, just in terms of proving. And I thought that being married would sort of fix all of my problems in a way. But what it did is it just highlighted where I was still unhealed. And I will say that, to bring this all back to faith was not a pillar of my upbringing. So we went to church, went to Sunday school. My parents were believers. I was a believer. I had a little kid's Bible. It was a part of our lives, but it was not the center of my life. It was not the center of my parents' lives. And it was not the center of my life when I got married. Nor was it the center of our marriage when we were married. So that being said, would life have been different had Christ been the center of our family and my parents and my own marriage? Absolutely. And that's part of the reason why I'm recording this episode, because hindsight's always 20/20, but how I live my life now with Christ as the foundation is very, very different. And would I have made different choices? Probably. So again, I just want to be real and honest, because I think we sit in our shame, and even if it's different issues and different struggles, the bottom line is we all struggle with shame and disappointment in ourselves, and thinking we made mistakes, and thinking that, we just screwed up our lives and this is it, and that's part of the reason why I'm sharing this, is to show you that that's not true. So moving on. So continuing into my marriage, late 20s, I know I shared this in my testimony, but in my late 20s, that's where I had my quarter life breakdown. I hit my rock bottom mentally. I was very unstable, very unwell. And a lot of this came from my expectations that I had. So my anxiety was fueled in so many ways by me putting all of this pressure on myself, on my husband. So much of the burden I carried with my family and just my perfectionism and stress at work, all of these things, relying only on myself, not putting any of that on God, which is exactly what He wants us to do. I will share that more later. It was too much for me, and I broke. And this happened when I was about 29. So I say this because we are not meant to be self-reliant. If you haven't watched my episode on self-help being a scam, go ahead and watch that, because this is the crux of that. Like, I relied on myself for everything, and that worked for a while, but then it didn't, and it's not sustainable, and you can't do it on your own. And so had I had a relationship with God, and had I had that foundation of Jesus Christ, I'm positive that I would not have gone through such a terrible time in my late 20s. I would not have felt so alone. I would not have felt abandoned. I wouldn't have felt abandoned by my husband, by my parents. At least not as much, right? I wouldn't have felt so alone, because now even there are moments when, we all still feel like we're alone or people don't understand us. I at least know now, no matter what, God is in my corner. And at that time, 10, 15 years ago, or even 25 years ago, when I was, a teenage girl, I didn't have anyone in my corner. And God always was in my corner, but I didn't know that, I didn't feel that, I didn't have a relationship with him. And I wish that had been different. I wish that I did. But I do now, so praise God for that. So moving into my divorce, my husband and I, we did separate, we got divorced, and this is when I moved out. I went to India on my own. I really started diving into the self-help world, into yoga, and this is when my self-reliance really hit an all-time high. So, I was the epitome of self-sufficient, independent, masculine energy, doing, hustling, boss babe, all the things. And, I essentially traded one hamster wheel for another, or one stressful situation for another. And that is where I will say, no, the grass is not greener. That saying is so popular, and it's such a cliche for a reason, because it's not greener. My life did not get better or easier after I got divorced. Some things, yes, changed, sure, but I also created a lot more problems for myself, a lot more complications, more stress in different ways for myself. And it was just another form of loneliness, honestly. So, I guess that's been sort of the theme of my life up until last year. So for 39 years, all I've really known was shame, unworthiness, not feeling good enough, abandonment from basically every person in my life, my parents, my husband, friends, my job, my boss, like everybody. I felt like just didn't live up to my expectations. And just feeling like I had to do it all on my own. And this is a huge burden. This is a huge, huge burden. And if you understand this for yourself, if you know what I'm talking about, this feeling. It's physical. It affects our physical health. It affects mental health, obviously emotional health. It affects every part of our lives. And this is exactly what Satan wanted. This is what he wanted for my life. He won for a lot of years of my life, because I was stuck in that place of shame and feeling alone and abandoned and not reaching out to God, which is, again, exactly what he wants. And I was disconnected. I felt like I was just in a really terrible place on and off for 10 years, from 29 to 39. And, I tell people in my personal life, like, it's been a rough decade. And it's because I was trying to do it all on my own. So whether you're dealing with divorce or a breakup or family issues or any sort of stress or struggle, whatever it might be in life, mistakes you've made, detours you've taken, I'm here to tell you that the enemy wants you shameful, filled with self-guilt, filled with unworthiness, filled with regret. And he wants you to think that you're alone and that you have to do life on your own. But that is not true. That is absolutely not true. So I think this is a good place to end this episode. I just wanted to share, I guess, the personal backstory and my testimony of my divorce. I know there's a lot of shame about this. Actually, when I first started coaching and I started my business, I worked with divorced women, and there is so much shame in this area. And again, even if it's not you directly, it affects families, it affects everyone involved. So if this is for you, I'm praying for you. I'm praying that you know that you don't have to live in shame, that you don't have to do it all on your own. Call on God. He loves you. He's going to meet you where you are. No sin is unforgivable. So, I had that shame too for a long time of, I committed this sin. God's mad at me. Oh, my life is so hard because God is angry and this is my karma. Like, none of that is true. None of that is true. That's not how God works. God is loving and he's forgiving, and he does not work that way. So I guess that's my little encouragement to you. Thank you if you've made it this far. Thank you for listening to this story. It is, it's obviously deeply personal, but I do feel like sharing this could help someone who feels similarly or who is dealing with shame. So thank you for listening, joining. Stay tuned for the next episode because I'm going to share what happened and sort of where I'm at now. So stay tuned. God bless you. Have a wonderful day.